want to go over. I want to start slow, and then we can work our way upwards from there. Okay, I'm gonna wait another 5 minutes because I mean, from past experience, I know that um, people tend to join like 5 minutes after 4 o'clock, So I'm gonna wait a little bit. Okay, I think before we start this class, I just want to get a general idea of how much Python you guys already know. I just want to assess. I should have done this earlier, definitely, but I just want to assess where you guys are at in terms of how much Python experience you already have. You can just text in the chat, but just tell me, guys, how experienced in Python do you think you guys are, so that I at least know. Okay, so, sorry. Yeah, from what I understand, we have a good mix of people who have a lot of experience, a bit of experience, and not at all experience. So that's perfect. That's typically what you would want in a Python class. So yeah, I think I'm just gonna proceed like normal. I just want to make sure I just want to make sure that that I wasn't teaching a class full of experts. So just wanted to make sure. Okay, so for a lot of the people who actually know the basics, then learning a lot of the advanced data structures will be more interesting. So I can't wait to be teaching that kind of content. For those who are just learning, this is also a very valuable experience. So I'm not getting the same turnout as I got previous class. I got like 50 people, but that's probably because some people are going to join later, inevitably. So I'm going to wait another 5 more minutes because uh, also, so as you can see, Google Meet is very limited because it doesn't allow us to admit people once I start the lesson. So, if you guys could go to our website and you could donate in our page, we can pay for a more advanced virtual conferencing software. So, actually, sorry, we don't even need that. We have one already. Never mind. You don't need to donate. Never mind. Again, this class is meant to be very introductory, so those who are more experienced may not get as much value out of this class. Although I will be holding some more advanced classes later on. I think this class is like three-fourths meant for beginners, so very basic syntax so that it's easily comprehensible. Personally, apparently Houston Independent School District gives a free access to premium Zoom and WebEx software. So I'm considering switching to that completely because then I can mute everybody. And Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I think this will probably be all the people that join. Okay. I think I'll begin the class now. Okay. For those of you who don't know me now, that if this is your first or if this is your first class, my name is Prahlad Bhat. I'm going to be teaching Python today. If you still need, if you've missed all these classes so far, I highly recommend you check out our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel is going to be. Let me show you. So our YouTube channel is going to be. Oh, can you guys see my screen? Okay. So, uh, right. So we have our links and resources page, and it contains all the information. So whatever code that we have in Trinket, it'll be here. So you just go to general and go to links and resources. We have our YouTube channel, our Trinket code, as well as the calendar link for the sessions and dates, and it's all been modified and up to date. So you guys can check that out if you want to. Okay, so let's talk about where did we leave off last class? We went to if else statements. Okay, let us check my trinkets. Okay, so before I get into functions, if you guys still want to do a review about if else statements, so if we remember correctly, let's revisit the example problem we had previously. So um, we defined a variable called luggage weight, and we set it to the numerical value 35, right? And so we asked this if else, if we can call it an if elif else statement, but we asked this if else statement if we gave it a set of conditions that it has to satisfy in order for certain lines of code to run. Okay, so for example, if this condition was satisfied, when we say the condition is satisfied, that means the condition needs to be equivalent to true. So this would be 35 is less than or equal to 10, which is false. So this print statement is not executed. Same thing for here and here. So the result was else, and then for else because else is always the last case scenario. Else we don't actually put any we don't put any parenthesis input in the if else statement, because we already have an elif statement to do that for us. And else is always the last case scenario. So it assumes there's no other case that's possible. So that's why it'll print this at the very end if necessary. Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, people are still joining. I'm gonna wait quickly. Oh, so everybody can see my screen, correct? Just want to make sure. And no one can see my. Ah, okay. That's the problem. I see. Okay, let me stop sharing. Okay, let's present now. Okay. Okay, can everybody see my screen now? If you can't see, I think you should be able to see my screen. I don't know. Okay, everybody can see my screen. Why can't people see my screen? That's weird. I think you need to pin. You need to pin my screen. So you click this pin. Yeah, you pin my screen. But I've already pinned my screen for you guys. So, uh, oh, that's probably why. There we go. You guys can pin my screen now. You can see it all. So you don't need to print it anymore. I think everybody can see it at this point. So yeah, you don't even need to pin it anymore. It's already here. Okay, that was kind of funky. So you guys can see this now, right? Um, right. So if we come back to this example, I hope I'm not going too slowly. Yeah. So we have an if-else statement. We are presented with multiple cases, and if these cases are satisfied, the respective lines of code below these cases run. So if this evaluates to true, it runs. So that's kind of the structure of the if, elif, else statement. And just to review the syntax, if you want a deeper look in that, we have our if, and we have some condition. So by condition, it has to be sum A is being compared using an operator to B. and this operator can be equivalent to B. Okay, it could be not equals to B, right? It can also be less than or equal to B, greater than or equal to B, etc., etc. Okay, we have this condition, and we put colon to denote that this is an if-else statement. So if the condition holds true, some action must occur. However, if this is not true, we have another case scenario, elif. If this is not true, then if this is true, so another thing, A is less than or equal to B, or it's equivalent to B, and another action must occur. And then finally, if both of these conditions aren't satisfied, that automatically means that, so if A is not greater than or equal to B and A is not equivalent to B, that means A has to be less than B. So we don't actually need to say else A is less than or equal to B, because that's the only option that's left. So the Python already knows this, and the last case scenario must occur. Okay, so of course this isn't the actual syntax. I was just trying to show you, but anything can replace this. So it can be a print statement, it can be, and I'll show you guys some of the functions you can actually put in place of these and so we've been experimenting with print statements where all we did was printed some value, right? There's actually more complicated and interesting ways of using if-else statements with functions. So we'll get into that in just a bit. So if anybody has any questions about if and else, please unmute yourself and you can quickly just ask me the question before I proceed with functions. Does anybody have questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Could you review the inputs?
Inputs? You mean arguments? You mean the what do you mean by input?
Oh, I meant like when you do like some variable equals input, and then you put the string there, and then like it
Okay.
asks you the question. And then,
Hold on one second. Just tell me what you mean by that. Where in
like,
this do you mean?
is it called user input?
Oh, you mean yeah, I remember that. It
Yeah, user input.
was input, right? Yeah, okay. Sure, I can go over that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so again, you don't have to, again, you don't, like, if you don't want to define luggage weight beforehand, instead you can just take input. So the syntax will look roughly like this: input, and then within the input you just put what the question is that you want to ask, or what the prompt is for the user to respond to. So what is the weight of your luggage? Okay, so this could be potentially be your question, and then if I just run this, let me just. So it's just going to say, what is the weight of your luggage? Now let's just say my luggage is 35 pounds. Okay. So that's all it's going to do essentially. Don't worry about this code. It's part of another thing I'm trying to show you guys for functions. Just focus on this. So
Don't
it
we have
asked
to
me
put
what the weight,
int?
huh?
Don't we have to put int to like that thing int for in front of that use for the user input because you're putting in
No,
a
no, no.
number.
So yeah. I'm gonna show you guys what I mean when I do this. Okay, I put float, right? But I'll show you guys exactly what that means when I get to the functions unit. Okay, so to keep that question to yourself, I'll answer it in just a minute when I go into functions. So yeah, at least in terms of this, does that answer everybody's questions? Can I proceed now? Actually,
Yeah,
I can only answer
yeah.
very few questions because we're kind of limited on time now, so I think I'll leave 10 minutes at the end. So if I just really quickly speed by this, you guys keep your if else questions to yourself, and if you still have questions after that, I'll answer them later. Okay, so oh, you can you guys see my screen? Okay, cool, everybody can see my screen. Great. Okay, so you guys can see this, so let's talk about functions. Okay, let's talk about functions. What is a function? What specifically is a function? Well, a function in plain terms is just here. It's a block of code. It's a block of code that only executes when it is called. Sorry for my bad handwriting. It's the best I can do using a stylus pen. By an argument. Okay? I will explain what an argument is in just a second, but this is a very important term, argument. Okay? Well, I'm a high schooler. I would think my handwriting would be better, but also, could you please mute yourself? Thank you. Thank you for the compliment. Okay, but anyways, it's just a block of code that only executes when it's called by an argument. So remember when we print out our when we have our like our if and else statement, right? And we print it out, right? No matter what we do to this unless we actually create it as a comment, this line of code will always run whether we want it to or not. So functions are essentially just executable blocks of code that can only run when we tell it to run. And I'll show you guys specifically what I mean by that. And so why do we even use functions? What's the purpose of it? Well, functions allow us to perform repetitive tasks conveniently. Okay? So we use functions because if we have large blocks of code and we want to keep if we have a we have a large block of code, okay, but we want to repeat that block of code every single time, but with a new parameter each time. Instead of rewriting that same block of code over and over and over again, we can store it in a function and then call that function with an argument. So that's essentially what a function is. And so how do we define a function syntactically? How is a function defined in Python? Well, it roughly goes something along these lines. We call def, okay? And then the function. Here, I'll do it in a different color. So we call def and we say, so my function. You can name it anything, but I'm just going to call the function my function. And it accepts input, or in Python terms, an argument, or arguments. You have more arguments. Okay? And now, just like we did in the if-else statement, we denote the end of the function, or the beginning of the function, with a colon. And then, just like last time, we provide a space. Python already does this for you, but just to signify. So it kind of gives you like a space, a tab space. And then whatever action of code that you want will be defined down here. Okay? That's it. You don't need to close, just like in other languages, you might need to close the function. So sometimes in other languages, not to confuse you guys, but you usually have to do brackets and close brackets to signify the end of the function. But that's not the case in Python. Python makes defining functions extremely convenient and extremely easy. So that's it. That's really all a function is. But imagine the power of the function is so valuable. So if you have to execute like 53 lines of code, right? So let's just say you have a function and you want to print. Let's just say it performs a whole bunch of operations. So let's just say this function performs complex arithmetic. Okay, and so that arithmetic. So let's just say the function accepts an input of like 4. So let's just say you did the arithmetic with the number 4. Okay. Now imagine having to do the whole arithmetic operation again, except this time with the number 5, and then the number 6, and then the number 7. That's going to take you a very, very long time and hours of wasted work. Rather, you can store all these arithmetic operations or whatever you want to do in this function, and then you can do something called calling the function. And simply all you have to do is say, just this is called calling the function. You type out the function and you put in the argument that it wants to accept. Okay? So let's just say the argument is 6. So now instead of having to perform the complex arithmetic again and again and again, this time replacing the number 4 with 5, then with 6, then with 7, you can just call the function multiple times and it produces the same result. 7, then 8. So let me give you an example of what this means. And I'll give you a very simple example. Oh yeah. So these functions I just showed you, this defining the function syntax. This is actually all done by us. So we are defining the function. But functions apply to also a host of powerful tools that Python employs. So Python also has its own inbuilt function. This is a human-made function. We've made this function using a set of tools that Python gives us. Python has its own set of very simple functions that we can manipulate to do the tasks that we need. These all count as functions, and they all have different purposes. Okay. If you remember last time, stir. This is actually a function that accepts input of a string. So, stir 4. So this essentially becomes the string 4. Remember, string 4 is not the same thing as numeric 4. Okay, they're different data types. We treat them as separate data types. So string essentially takes an argument, takes a non-string argument, and converts that non-string argument into a string. So argument essentially just means input into a function. Float, okay? Float converts whatever non-float input that you put into it into a float. So let's just say I have let's just say 3. 3 is actually a numeric. What the result of this is that float is going to convert 3 into 3.0, which is actually a float data type. Same thing with abs. Abs is the absolute value. So essentially, absolute value just takes an argument of a positive or negative number, and it converts that into a positive number. That's what absolute value does. So that's because that becomes, so -4 becomes 4, -5 becomes 5, etc. So Python already has a host of inbuilt functions that can perform a variety of tasks. The job of coders is to create more complex tasks that can do very more complex arithmetic and functions that can do a lot more complex tasks that Python cannot handle using these basic functions themselves. So these are very simple functions, but we can also create our own set of very advanced functions. And I'll get into those in just a bit. But right now, let's start with a very simple function. So, okay, let's start with a very simple example of a function. Okay, let's just let's remember we start off, so just to begin, to define our function, we say def, and as you can see, when we say def, it turns pink. You see how normally these variables are black, and then strings are represented by red. So the color usually represents what kind of piece of code that is. So this is actually a defining code piece. This is a function. This is a variable. Okay. Strings are denoted by red. It depends on the software. Stuff like, you can actually change the color of these, but the color usually is correlated to the type of code it is. So again, to get back, def just defines the function. So let's say let's just say we define a function called my function. And now you can name the function whatever you want. It doesn't have to be called my function. I just conveniently use it. It can be get name, or it could be help. It could be literally anything. But in my case, I'm going to be calling it my function. Okay, parentheses. Now within these parentheses, we don't actually have to put any arguments in here. So in reality, let's just do an example of a function that doesn't accept input. Okay, so in a lot of instances, we would actually want to have an argument in here, but we're not. Let's see what happens when we don't define an argument in here. So essentially what I'm saying is I'm defining a function that when called will print this statement to the console. Now let's see what happens. Let me quickly comment all these so that it doesn't run into the compiler. So we have this, and here, let's take this away. Oh yeah, I also forgot to mention, guys, that we also have multi-line comments in Python. So if you don't, so this comment only works for a single line comment. So you can do comments, right? But then after that comment, it becomes normal code, right? If you want to have multi-line comments, you define it by you do these three little do that. That's basically character can be found. It's like right next to the enter key. You do that. You type in that character 3 times. Okay, it's apostrophe. So you just do the 3 apostrophes to open the multi-line comment, and then 3 apostrophes to close the multi-line comment. So essentially, this entire block of code goes doesn't get run by the program. So now, what would happen if we run? So we've defined our function, right? Let's just see what happens when we run our code. Okay, let's make this a multi-line code as well. I don't want this to run. Where is our true statement coming from? Okay, don't worry about this true statement, guys. This is from a different function that I think I called earlier. But so as you can see, this function isn't running, and that's supposed to happen because we haven't called the function yet. So what I mean by calling the function is just like how I showed you. You call the function by just simply typing it in and defining the parameters you want. In this case, this is a function that doesn't have any parameters. We have told the function we don't really want to accept any input. Okay, so let's see what happens when we run this function. It says hello from a function. That's great. But since it doesn't accept any input, we don't really need to put any input in here. So let's just see what happens if we run this piece of code again. So it just says it 3 times. So instead of having to write this piece of code, print hello from a function 3 times in a row, we just call the function 3 times, and it does the job for us, right? So that's kind of the convenience of function. And in this example, it's a bit intuitive. It's not too complicated. But when you have like 50 lines of code that you really don't want to copy paste again, because functions also provide a lot of readability. Imagine having to copy paste a 50 line code multiple times. It's going to be hard to interpret all the code because it's going to be a big jumbly mess, and it'll be very, very hard to read. So that's why we use functions in the first place. So this was a very simple function. Okay, let's try a more complicated example. Let's see. So let's call my function add. Let's define a function called add, and we want to have the arguments a and b. So again, just like the function, you can name it to anything. You can name the arguments for anything as long as you call the arguments within the function, right? So you can't just define these arguments and then just say print hi, because there are unused arguments. If you say add of 2 and 3, it's just going to say print hi, right? And so the purpose of the function is to actually do something with these arguments. But if nothing is actually being done with these arguments, then these arguments are being unused and it's pointless. So the Python console will return an error. So you have to call these arguments within the function. So remember, this is the function, and we're inputting some arguments that will be used within our function. So let's just say let's define a variable within the function called add variable, and let's say that let's say that add variable is the result of a plus b. Okay. Again, so if we recall this function, add variable, let's just say 2, 3. So that means essentially what we're doing is we're adding 2 and 3 together. Nothing happens. Oh, I forgot to. Oh, no, sorry, it's add. Don't get confused. It's add. Yeah, sorry. This is the function. Okay. So if we run it, nothing will happen. Why? Because when we call the function, a plus b is being stored in add variable, but nothing's happening with add variable. So when we define a function, there's two ways of outputting the value, the result of this to the screen. One is that we can actually call a print statement. Let's print add variable. The same. Okay. Okay, and the result 5 pops up. Or you can do something called the return statement. This is a very important concept in Python. And then after you do the return, you have to click print, add variable. It'll run. Why is it not running? Oh yeah, because this code did not run. Okay. So those are essentially just the two ways of doing it. So now what you can do is also you can do all this stuff, right? But then not only can you do this, but you can actually take input, and then you can also concatenate it. Remember we had concatenation earlier on. So let's create a function called names, and let's create an argument called name. So it accepts input of a string called name. Okay. And let's just say let's allow the function to print name. Let's just say my name is name. And if we run the function, oh yeah, so if we run the function, as you can see, again, nothing is actually outputted because we haven't called the function. We have to physically call the function by calling the function and then inputting the argument. And so argument is, I'll put my name from that. So now it says my name is Prahlad. Okay, very interesting. So you can also do concatenation again. So whatever remember all this code that we were doing previously, doing this uppercase, lowercase, manipulating strings. So you can just you can just you can do manipulation of strings. You would do booleans. You can actually also do a if-else statement, and you can plug it in within a function, so you don't have to make multiple if-else statements. Okay, let's do an example of an if-else statement. So remember we had that if-else statement, right? What if an airline company had to do this to not one person? Imagine the airline company had to do this to not just me, but maybe hundreds of people in a day. Then it makes sense that the company doesn't want to have to write down this if-else statement multiple times with different luggage weight inputs, you know? So we have functions for a reason, because we can condense this code into one function. So let's try doing that here. So let's just call our function luggage weight checker. luggage weight checker. That's the name of our function. And let's just try, let's just copy paste everything that we did here. But instead of trying to ask for the input, because that's not what we're trying to do, let's say that luggage weight, and let's call the argument weight. Let's say the luggage weight is equivalent to the weight. So the weight that we input into this function is stored in the variable luggage weight. And then all the if-else manipulations are done here. All right? But if you remember correctly, when we define our function, we have to give it a space. So not only should we give space to this variable definition, this if-else statement also has to have the appropriate spacing. So once we call def, that means these else if-else elif statements should also have their own appropriate space. So you see how the order of things works. So this is like the hierarchy of spacing. We have our def function. So anything after our def function has a minimum of one space. Then since we called an if-else statement within this def function, it follows all the rules of defining an if-else function. So there's always one space after the if-else statement, the if statement, and then again, elif statement doesn't get space, and then one space, and then no space, and then one space, and then no space, and then one space within the context of the def function. So that's kind of how the spacing works. It follows a hierarchical structure. So imagine if I was within this else statement, I called another if statement. What if I did that? Then it would follow, and I would have to do this. So again, the spacing just kind of works like that. Okay, but now let's see what happens when I call the function luggage weight of luggage weight checker. Okay, let's see if that's okay. Cool. And let's just say the weight of my luggage is 13 pounds. Let's see what happens. Ooh. Oh yeah, you have to give the space.
When you copy pasted that piece of code, you had taken out the multi-line comment of the other copy.
What do you mean? Oh, you're correct. Yeah, you're so right. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I'm just going to multi-line comment this so it doesn't run this program. Correct. Now if I run the statement, okay, what happened here is I called the function which took input of 13, and so whatever code is executed in this function will be called. So it basically said, oh, okay, so let's compare 13 against all these conditions. And so because 13 is between 10 and 20, a $10 fare is required. Now, instead of copy pasting this if-else statement hundreds of times, we can actually just quickly do this. So now the function can do all these computations for us, and we don't have to worry about copy pasting this if-else statement again, because once we have defined our function, we can call it as many times as we like to get the desired result. So this time, $10 fare required, $30 fare required. So that's really cool. All right, so that's just another basic example of how we can use functions in Python using if-else statements. Similarly, like I said, every single thing we've done in Python so far can be used in a practical example in a function. So now let's see what else we have. Okay, so here's what we can do actually. Let's try to make a calculator out of all this. So let's just quickly forget about this. So this is one of the examples of an if-else statement within a function. So this is called a recursive function. All right. So what it does is here, if we can try to analyze the results of this and predict what happens here. So we can see 1 becomes 3, 3 becomes 6, 6 becomes 10, 10 becomes 15, 15 becomes 21. So notice how 1 plus 2, excuse me, is 3. 3 plus 3 is 6. 6 plus 4 is 10. So the number that's added each time increases by a value of 1, as can be seen here. So recursion is just saying that the value, so it starts at 2, right? And then it just adds 1 every time it adds to the number before it. So what this if else statement is saying that, hey, take the number, we start with adding by 2, we take the number before it, and we continue adding that number by 1 to the previous number. So 1 becomes 3 by adding 2, 3 becomes 2 plus 1, which is 3, becomes 6, 6 plus 3 plus 1, or 4, so 6 plus 4 is 10, 10 plus 4 plus 1, or 5, becomes 15, so on. So that's another one of the and this return function essentially just it's kind of like a return essentially just computes the value and stores it. So when we define our function, it doesn't necessarily store the value anywhere. The return result just makes sure that we can see the value of the result on our console. Okay. So let's try to make a calculator. This is one of the fun projects I used to do when I was first learning Python. So let's see if we can try to emulate that here. Let's make our own little complex little function. Let's try to make a calculator. But before we make a complete calculator, I'm going to show you guys, yeah, so this calculator, what we're going to do essentially is we're going to make a function within a function. Okay, and I'll explain how we're going to do that. So to start, we need a function that can add two arithmetic together. All right, so let's just call a function called add. So let's define a function called add, which takes input of two numbers, a and b. Let's just say that adding, let's define a variable called adding, and let that be the result of a plus b. So the value of a plus b, when the function is called, whatever argument is put into this function will be stored in the variable adding. Okay, and then we can say let's print the value, let's print adding to the screen, because that's kind of what we want. We want the calculator to produce some sort of result. Now let's define a separate function for subtraction, multiplication, division, and exponentiation, and let's even include modulus logic. So let's create a def defines a function, sub for subtract, or we can just subtract. Okay, the same. If you have two functions, the parameters can be the same. It's not like a conflict by creating parameters that are the same for a subtract or add. Okay, and then we can say sub a minus b. And let's print that result of that variable into the console. Again, let's do that again. So let's just do mult of a and b, so on and so forth. So mult equals a times b, and print the result of mult. Create a new function for, I think let's just make a 4-function calculator. Let's not get into, actually no, let's do exponentiation. So let's do, so let's divide, div a b. Yeah, let's make this a different. Okay, so let's make a division function. A divided by b, and then let's print division. So we print the, so essentially we've created a 4-function calculator, plus let's just do exponentiation. So def exp a b, and so what we're essentially saying when we define exponentiation, just call it expon for the sake of simplicity, is that we're defining a raised to the power b. We print expon. So we've created a let's say 5-function calculator, but now we're not really done because we want to create a complete calculator, right? We don't want to just
Quick question: why do we use Discord and not the Doodle handouts chat?
Could you please keep that question for the very end? I'm gonna have a Q&A session every single day. Sorry, every single session. So could you please hold that question until the end of the class?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Could you also mute yourself? Okay. So we have the 5-function calculator, but we want to create a calculator function for the sake so that we can have ease of access, because we don't want to be calling all these functions all the time when we want to do basic operations. So if we want to multiply 2 numbers and then add 2 numbers, instead of having to call the function every single time, let's create a new function called calc. So define a function called calc, and then let's have parameters a, b, but then let's also have a new parameter called operation. Okay. So this is essentially going to take an input of some a and some b, and then operation is essentially going to be what do we want to do with this? Like using these 2 numbers, what function out of these 5 functions, what function do we want to perform on these? So let's create an if statement. Okay. Let's say we're giving ourselves a couple options. Let's say if operation. Let's say if operation, because we're taking the argument and asking if this operation is, let's just say we're defining 5 strings addition. So let's just say our first string is addition. If our string, if the argument contains the values addition, then you should call the function add of a and b. Okay. So what this piece of code is saying, if we define calc, okay, and we want to perform some operation on b, but more specifically, we want to specify addition. So a and b added together. If we're specifying that, then the function add of b is going to be called, which essentially says that if we look over here, it's going to add the 2 numbers and print the result out. Okay, let's do this for all the functions. So let's say if operation equals subtraction. Oh yeah, sorry. Else if, or elif. So if it's not, if they didn't ask for addition, so instead if they ask for subtraction, then let's just say sub, is that what we define it to be? Subtract a comma b. Okay. So again, I just don't want to confuse you guys or anything, but a and this doesn't have to be a and b. I can actually call it to be x and y. Right? And so this function will borrow these parameters from the function. So this can be x and y. This can be x and y. Doesn't really mean anything really. So let's just say if we have calc, based on what we have right now, if we have calc 2, 3 addition, we're essentially saying, hey, 2 and 3 should be added together. So it's the function add 2, 3 is going to be performed, in which we print the result of the addition. So likewise, if we do all these things, so we do elif operation equals to multiplication, multiply. So let's do mult of x and y. All right, and then elif again, because this is so if these 2 haven't been called, then if the operation is indeed division, then we should call the function division, div of x and y. Okay, and finally, if it's none of these things, That means the only possible option is that it's exponentiation. Or actually, you know what? Let's assume the user made a mistake when trying to put in these things. So let's just say elif operation equals exponent. Okay. Exponentiation. Okay. And let's just say we'll call the function exp of x and y. So we're done with our calculator. Now if we, oh, and sorry, now the last case scenario is that the user makes a mistake. Okay. And so we're saying that if the user does not input any of these operations in, if none of these are the case, then we must say print. Could you save questions for the very end? I'm almost done, guys. Print error. Please try again. Okay. So now if we run this code segment, we're essentially defining these functions, and we're calling the function within this larger function within an if-else statement. So let's see how that performs. And since we haven't actually called the function, nothing's going to happen. So let's just say calc. Okay. Let's just say I want to calculate let's try to multiply 4 and 5 together. Multiplication. Okay. See what happens. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Equal to means assigning. Equivalent to, you have to use equivalent because of the comparator. I completely forgot. Okay. Okay. As you can see, it worked successfully. The answer is 20. Let's just say we made an error. Okay. We didn't actually type anything real. Like we didn't type in a valid operator, or we didn't type in a proper arithmetic operator. So let's see what happens when we try to run the. Why is my mouse not moving? Okay. Error, please try again. So it recognizes that we're not supposed to. It says we made an error. Let's say we want to add 5 and 4 together. Add or addition. 9. We have exponentiation. Right? 5 to the power 4 is 625. Okay. So we've made a fully functional calculator, and we've built it using concepts of defining these functions. Okay. And then calling this function within a larger function using if-else statements. So I think that's a nice tie-in to all the stuff we've learned in the past 2 lessons. Okay. So now if anybody has any questions, you can let me know. Does anybody have any questions? I feel like, yeah.
Yeah. So,
No.
why do we use Discord and not just the Doodle handouts?
Well, we use a good question, but here's the thing. Discord offers a lot more functionality, so we can actually do a whole host of. We can let people. See, the thing is, Discord allows us to have multiple chats within the server. Yeah, if you guys can, if you guys have any questions, of course, if you guys have any questions, please stay. If you don't have any questions, you can leave. Okay, so yeah, huh? Yeah, you can leave now.
There are I don't know.
Yes, you can.